The muddy waters of Cooper's Creek churned around Lily Morgan's tiny waist as she fought against the surging current. Two whimpering German shepherd puppies clung desperately to her shoulders, one balanced precariously on each side. Just moments earlier, the 7-year-old had been fleeing through the flooded forest when she'd become trapped between the rising waters and something far more terrifying. They emerged from the shadows like ghosts, massive, wild-looking dogs with rain-matted fur and gleaming eyes, at least 12 of them forming a tight circle around her. Their low growls vibrated through the air as the largest one, a battle-scarred German shepherd with a torn ear, stepped forward. "Please don't hurt them," Lily whispered, her blonde hair plastered against her pale face, blood trickling from a gash on her forehead. She tightened her grip on the trembling puppies. The massive dog locked eyes with her, its amber gaze seemingly peering into her soul. Then it did something that defied everything the little girl had been taught to fear. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Oak Ridge, Tennessee wasn't where Lily Morgan was supposed to grow up. 3 months ago, her life had been normal, a small apartment in Chicago, friends at school, and weekends spent with her grandfather James, who filled her head with stories of his days as a forest ranger. But then came the funeral, her father's job loss, and finally the move to this strange little town nestled between rolling hills and dark forests. "You stay away from those woods. You hear me?" her mother Sarah would remind her daily, eyes tight with worry. "And especially stay away from dogs." The scar on Lily's right arm, 3 small puncture marks from a Labrador's teeth when she was 4, was reason enough in Sarah's mind. The incident had left more than physical scars. Lily's nightmares about snarling teeth still woke her some nights. Their rented farmhouse sat at the edge of town, where civilization gave way to wilderness. From her bedroom window, Lily could see Cooper's Creek winding like a silver ribbon through the trees. Sometimes, when the wind was right, she thought she heard howling. "Them dogs out there ain't normal," Walter Peterson had told her when he'd come to welcome them to town. The 78-year-old current forest ranger spoke with the slow, deliberate cadence of someone who'd seen too much to be hurried. "Your grandpa knew it. That's why he protected them. Way back when." Martha Jenkins from the general store nodded sagely whenever the topic arose. "Been that way since before my time," she'd say, restocking canned beans with arthritic hands. "The Morgan family's always had a way with them creatures." Sheriff Bill Townsend dismissed such talk with a wave of his weathered hand. "Bunch of old wives' tales," he'd scoff. "Just regular wild dogs gone feral is all." But Lily had seen the way her mother tensed whenever James's name and dogs were mentioned in the same breath. There was history there, buried like the old collar she'd found in her grandfather's belongings, worn leather with a tarnished tag reading simply "Guardian." Lily kept to herself at school, her dyslexia making her an easy target for teasing, letters jumbled before her eyes, making reading a daily humiliation. Yet somehow, in this strange new place where her grandfather had once walked, she felt an odd sense of belonging, as if something in these woods had been waiting for her all along. The first Monday of summer vacation dawned hot and sticky, the Tennessee humidity hanging like a wool blanket over Oak Ridge. Lily sat at the breakfast table, pushing soggy cereal around her bowl while her mother rushed to get ready for her shift at the diner. "I'll be back by 4, Sarah said, applying lipstick in the hallway mirror. "Mrs. Winters next door will check on you at lunch. Don't answer the door for anyone else." And Lily, she paused, giving her daughter a stern look. Stay in the yard. No exploring, especially not near the woods or the creek. There's rain in the forecast. Lily nodded dutifully, though a small flame of rebellion had already kindled in her chest. She'd overheard Walter Peterson talking to her mother yesterday about tracks found near their property, large canine prints that had Sarah double-checking the locks before bed. I mean it, her mother added, as if reading her thoughts. Promise me, Lily. I promise, she answered, fingers crossed under the table. Her grandfather had taught her that some promises needed breaking when something more important was at stake. Once her mother's car disappeared down the dusty driveway. Lily pulled on her red rain boots and tucked her grandfather's old compass into her pocket. The woods behind their house called to her with a whisper of rustling leaves. 20 minutes, she told herself. She'd just explore for 20 minutes and be back before anyone knew she was gone. The forest welcomed her with dappled sunlight and the sweet scent of pine. Lily followed a narrow deer trail, occasionally checking the compass as Grandpa James had taught her. Always know which way is home, he'd said, his voice now just a memory that ached in her chest. She hadn't planned to go far, but the discovery of fresh paw prints much larger than a normal dog's pulled her deeper into the trees. The prints led toward the edge of their property, where the Morgan land butted up against a chain-link fence she hadn't noticed before. Crouching behind a thicket of brambles, Lily peered through the leaves at a sprawling compound of metal buildings and outdoor kennels. A sign hung on the gate, Harrington Canine Breeding, private property. A tall man with a weathered face and cold eyes emerged from the main building, followed by another man in a crisp suit whom Lily didn't recognize. Their voices carried clearly in the still air. These aren't just any dogs. Frank, the suited man said, his tone frustrated. If word gets out about what you're doing here, nobody's asking questions. Frank Harrington cut him off. I've been operating here for years without issue. These puppies from the new litter will fetch 6 figures each once they're trained. The bloodline is perfect. The bloodline was supposed to be extinct, the man hissed. Those Morgan dogs were nothing but unusually intelligent German shepherds, Frank finished. No different than what I'm breeding here, just better controlled. The old man's dead now anyway. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs. Morgan dogs. Could they be talking about Grandpa James? The men moved toward a separate building, their argument continuing in hushed tones. Once they disappeared inside, Lily edged closer to the fence, drawn by soft, whimpering sounds from one of the kennels. 2 German shepherd puppies, no more than 8 weeks old, huddled together in a small cage near the creek that ran along the property's edge. Unlike the other dogs in the facility, these puppies looked neglected, their water bowl overturned and empty, their small bodies trembling. One had a noticeable limp, while the other had a cut above its eye. Lily's hands clutched the chain-link fence. Something was very wrong here. The puppies looked directly at her, their amber eyes seeming to plead for help. A sudden electronic tone made her jump. An emergency alert blared from the facility buildings. Flash flood warning for eastern Tennessee. Heavy rainfall expected. Residents in low-lying areas near Cooper's Creek should evacuate immediately. The compound erupted into activity. Men rushed from buildings, loading adult dogs into vans. Frank Harrington barked orders, his face tense as the sky darkened ominously overhead. Get the breeding stock out first. Move it. In the chaos, no one approached the isolated kennel where the 2 puppies cowered. The first fat raindrops began to fall as Frank's truck roared to life, leading a convoy of vehicles away from the facility. "What about the new litter?" someone shouted. "No room." "We'll come back for them when the weather clears," Frank called back, his truck already turning onto the access road. Lily watched in disbelief as the last vehicle disappeared, leaving the puppies behind. Thunder cracked overhead as the rain intensified, and she could see the creek already beginning to swell, muddy water creeping toward the kennel. Grandpa James's voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the wrong rules." The fear of dogs that had gripped her since the bite incident warred with the knowledge that those puppies would drown if she did nothing. The creek was rising rapidly, fueled by rain that had been falling in the mountains for days. Lily made her decision, scrambling along the fence line. She found a spot where floodwaters had already eroded the soil beneath the chain link. Taking a deep breath, she squeezed under the fence, tearing her t-shirt and scraping her back in the process. The rain was falling in sheets now, plastering her blonde hair to her face as she splashed through puddles toward the kennel. The puppies began to bark excitedly as she approached, their tails wagging despite their dire situation. The kennel door was secured with a simple latch, which Lily's small fingers managed to open after several fumbling attempts. The moment the door swung wide, both puppies tumbled out, pressing against her legs with desperate gratitude. "It's okay," she whispered, trying to sound braver than she felt. "I'm going to get you somewhere safe." But as she turned back toward the fence, Lily's heart sank. The creek had already overflowed its banks, cutting off her return path. The rising water swirled around her ankles, tugging at her boots with frightening strength. In the distance, thunder rumbled like an approaching train. She was trapped, alone with two frightened puppies, as the floodwaters continued to rise around them. Lily's heart pounded as the water swirled around her ankles, rising with alarming speed. The smaller puppy, the one with the limp, whimpered and pressed against her leg, trembling not just from fear, but from pain as well. She knelt down, her hands shaking as she reached for the injured animal. "I won't let anything happen to you," she promised, her voice barely audible above the pounding rain. As her fingers touched the puppy's matted fur, a memory flashed through her mind, searing pain. Screams, her mother's panicked face. She was 4 again, reaching for a neighbor's friendly-looking Labrador, not understanding that the dog's wagging tail didn't match its frightened eyes. The sudden snap of jaws, the puncture of teeth, the hot gush of blood down her arm. Lily gasped, pulling her hand back instinctively. The puppy looked up at her with confused eyes, innocent and hurting. "Not the same," she whispered to herself, forcing her hand forward again. "These puppies need me." With careful movements, she examined the limping puppy, finding a deep gash on its hind leg. The other puppy, though stronger, had a cut above its eye that was swelling rapidly. Both were dangerously thin, their ribs visible beneath wet fur. The water had reached her calves now, the current growing stronger with each passing minute. Lily glanced around frantically, searching for an escape route. The facility building stood on slightly higher ground, but the doors were locked. The road was completely submerged. Their only hope was to move uphill, into the unfamiliar forest beyond the breeding facility. Lily stripped off her light jacket, fashioning a makeshift sling. With careful movements, she positioned one puppy on each shoulder, using the jacket to secure them in place. The injured puppy whimpered but settled against her neck, its tiny heart racing against her skin. "We're going to be okay," she told them, though uncertainty tightened her throat. She pictured her mother's face when she realized Lily was missing. The thought brought tears to her eyes, mixing with raindrops on her cheeks, wading through knee-deep water. Lily struggled toward the tree line. Each step was a battle against the current, her small frame nearly toppling several times. By the time she reached higher ground, her legs were scratched from debris carried by the flood, and her red boots were filled with muddy water. The forest loomed before her, dark and unfamiliar in the storm. Lily knew she should follow Cooper's Creek upstream to find her way home, but the normally gentle creek had transformed into a raging torrent that tore at its banks, uprooting small trees and carrying them downstream like bathtub toys. "Which way, Grandpa?" she whispered, pulling out his compass with one hand while balancing the puppies with the other. The needle spun uselessly, damaged by water. Lily bit her lip to keep from crying out in frustration and fear. With no other choice, she plunged into the woods, hoping to circle around to familiar territory. The rain continued relentlessly, turning the forest floor into a treacherous maze of mud and hidden roots. Twice she fell, managing each time to twist her body to protect the puppies from impact. As daylight began to fade, terror gripped her heart. She was lost. The landmarks were unrecognizable, the paths hidden beneath water and debris. The weight of the puppies, initially manageable, now strained her small shoulders until they burned with pain. "Just a little farther," she encouraged them, though she had no destination in mind. The smaller puppy had grown quiet, too quiet, its breathing shallow against her neck. "Lily." Sarah Morgan's voice cracked as she called her daughter's name for what felt like the 100th time. The rain pelted her unprotected head, but she barely noticed, her eyes frantically scanning the flooded yard. When she'd returned from her shift to find the house empty, she'd assumed Lily was with Mrs. Winters. The discovery that her daughter had never shown up for lunch had unleashed a primal fear, unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. "We've got the South Ridge covered," Sheriff Townsend reported, his uniform soaked through as he approached. "Walter's checking the creek banks with 2 deputies. If she's out there, we'll find her." "She's afraid of dogs," Sarah said, her voice hollow with worry. "Ever since the bite, she wouldn't go near them willingly." Martha Jenkins appeared at Sarah's side, holding an umbrella over both of them. "Child, you need to come inside before you catch your death." "I can't," Sarah snapped, then immediately regretted her tone. "I'm sorry, Martha. I just can't sit still while she's out there." Martha's weathered hand patted Sarah's arm. "There's something you should know about this place," she said quietly. "About your father-in-law, and about those dogs in the woods." Sarah stiffened. "This isn't the time for local legends." "It ain't legend, child. Your Lily's got Morgan blood, and those dogs remember." Before Sarah could respond, Walter Peterson's truck skidded to a halt in the muddy driveway. The elderly ranger climbed out with surprising agility for his age, his face grim beneath his rain-soaked hat. "Found something," he called, holding up a small red boot. "Down by Harrington's place." Sarah's knees nearly buckled. Frank Harrington, the dog breeder. Walter nodded grimly. "Place is deserted," he evacuated when the flood warning came in. "But there's signs someone small went under his fence, and footprints leading toward the creek." "The creek," Sarah's voice rose in panic. "It's a raging river by now." "We'll find her," Sheriff Townsend assured her, but the concern in his eyes betrayed his confident words. "I've called in emergency services from the next county. We'll have boats on the water within the hour." An hour might be too late, Walter said quietly, his eyes meeting Sarah's. But there might be another way to find her. How? Sarah demanded. Walter exchanged a look with Martha. The dogs, he said simply. If she's out there, they'll know. The wild dogs. You want to rely on wild animals to find my daughter. Sarah's voice cracked with disbelief. Not just any wild dogs. Martha interjected. The Morgan dogs. Your father-in-law protected them for decades. They never forget a kindness or a bloodline. This is insane, Sarah whispered, but desperation clawed at her heart. Night was falling. The storm was intensifying. Her 7-year-old daughter was lost in a flood zone, possibly injured. James kept records, Walter said, in his cabin up by the North Ridge. Notes about the dogs, their territories, how to call them. Call them, Sarah repeated numbly. Walter nodded. We don't have time to explain everything, but if you want to find Lily before this storm gets worse, we need to try something that folks around here might call crazy. A crack of thunder split the sky, as if punctuating his words. Sarah looked toward the dark forest, then down at the tiny red boot in Walter's hands. Her daughter was out there, alone and afraid. Show me, she said finally. Show me how to find my daughter. Darkness settled over the forest like a heavy blanket, transforming familiar shapes into looming shadows. Lily struggled forward, each step a battle against exhaustion and terrain that seemed determined to trap her. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle. But the damage was done. Cooper's Creek had overflowed its banks in dozens of places, creating a maze of water obstacles that forced her deeper into unknown territory. Just a little farther, she whispered to the puppies. Though her arms trembled from their weight, the smaller one, which she'd started calling Tiny in her mind, had grown alarmingly still against her left shoulder. Only the occasional whimper confirmed he was still alive. The stronger puppy Brave, she'd named him, remained alert, his warm tongue occasionally licking her ear as if offering encouragement. A fallen tree loomed ahead, its massive trunk providing the first real shelter she'd seen since leaving Harrington's property. Lily carefully lowered herself beneath its protective arch, gently placing the puppies on a bed of relatively dry leaves. In the faint moonlight that occasionally broke through the clouds, she examined Tiny's injured leg. The wound had stopped bleeding but felt hot to the touch, a bad sign. She remembered from her grandfather's first aid lessons. You need to be brave, she told the puppy, tearing a strip from the bottom of her already ragged t-shirt. With gentle fingers, she bound the wound, trying to remember everything her grandfather had taught her about animal care. Grandpa would know exactly what to do, she murmured, her voice catching. He always knew. Brave nuzzled against her hand, his amber eyes watching her every move. There was an intelligence in those eyes that startled her, as if the puppy understood not just her words, but her intentions. Are you hungry? I'm sorry I don't have any food. Lily's own stomach cramped with hunger. Hours had passed since breakfast, and the physical exertion had depleted her small body's reserves. A rustling sound from beyond their shelter snapped her attention away from the puppies. Something was moving in the underbrush, something large. Lily pulled the puppies closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. A flashlight would have revealed what lurked in the darkness, but all she had was moonlight filtering through clouds and trees. The rustling stopped. Silence stretched, broken only by the drip of rainwater from leaves and the distant rush of the flooded creek, just as Lily began to relax. A low growl rumbled through the darkness, deep, resonant, and unmistakably canine. "Hello," she whispered, her voice so small it barely carried beyond their shelter. "Is someone there?" Another growl, closer this time. Brave stiffened against her side. His ears pricked forward, but, surprisingly, no answering growl came from his throat. Tiny remained motionless, his breathing shallow but stable. Lily remembered her grandfather's voice. "Animals sense fear. Lily pad, if you're afraid, they're afraid. Show them calm. They'll show you respect." Drawing a deep breath, Lily spoke again, forcing steadiness into her voice. "We're just trying to get home. We won't hurt you." A shape moved at the edge of her vision, large, four-legged, melting back into the shadows before she could focus on it. Another appeared briefly to her right, then vanished. They were being circled, assessed. "Dogs," she whispered to herself, recognizing the silhouettes from her grandfather's books. Not wolves, but wild dogs, large ones. The legendary dogs of Oak Ridge that Walter Peterson had mentioned. Perhaps. Fear crawled up her spine. But curiously, the terror she expected didn't materialize. These animals could have attacked already if that was their intention. Instead, they were watching, waiting almost as if they were as curious about her as she was about them. "I'm Lily Morgan," she said, louder this time. "My grandpa was James Morgan. He was a forest ranger here." The rustling stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, Lily could have sworn she felt a shift in the atmosphere, a change in the quality of attention focused on her. The name Morgan seemed to hang in the air between them. Without warning, rain began pouring again, heavy sheets that quickly penetrated their makeshift shelter. Water pooled around Lily's legs, rising with alarming speed as runoff from higher ground sought the path of least resistance. "We need to move," she told the puppies, gathering them up despite her aching arms. "This place isn't safe anymore." As she crawled from beneath the fallen tree, a flash of lightning illuminated the forest and froze her in place. Standing not 10 feet away was a massive German shepherd, its scarred face and torn ear giving it a fearsome appearance. Behind it, partially visible among the trees, were other dogs of similar size. Lily clutched the puppies tighter. "Please," she whispered, not sure what she was asking for. The lead dog took a step forward, then another, its amber eyes never leaving hers. When it was just 3 feet away, it lowered its head and sniffed the air, smelling her. The puppies. Perhaps detecting the Morgan scent that Martha Jenkins claimed these animals never forgot. After what felt like eternity, the dog turned and trotted a few paces away. There it stopped and looked back at her, waiting. "You want me to follow you?" Lily asked, scarcely believing what was happening. The dog made a soft sound, not quite a bark, not quite a whine, and took another few steps before looking back again. The message couldn't have been clearer if it had spoken aloud, with no better options. And the water rising steadily around her feet. Lily began to follow. the puppies secure against her shoulders. The massive dog led her through the forest with confident steps, choosing paths that avoided the deepest water and steepest terrain. Occasionally, other dogs appeared at the periphery of her vision, flanking their small procession like silent guardians. "Where are you taking me?" Lily asked, but received no answer beyond the steady pace of her canine guide. "This is crazy," Sarah Morgan muttered as she followed Walter Peterson through the rain-soaked forest. The elderly ranger moved with surprising agility despite his age, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness with practiced precision. "Crazy would be ignoring what we know about these woods," Walter replied, without slowing. "Your father-in-law documented everything. Those notebooks in his cabin tell the whole story." Sarah clutched the battered journal they'd retrieved from James Morgan's forest cabin. She'd skimmed its pages by flashlight, detailed observations of a pack of unusually intelligent dogs living in these forests, descendants of military working dogs that had escaped a transport accident decades ago. James had protected them from hunters and trappers, studying their behavior patterns and remarkable intelligence. "Even if everything in this journal is true," Sarah argued, "these are still wild animals. How could they possibly help us find Lily?" Martha Jenkins, who had insisted on joining the search despite her arthritis, answered from behind them, "Because they know her blood child. The Morgans have been watching over these dogs for 3 generations. Now they're returning the favor. And they just magically know she's in trouble." Sarah couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice, even as desperation made her follow this bizarre plan. "They know these woods better than any human," Walter said simply. "They know when something's wrong, when someone doesn't belong. Your little girl is out there with floodwaters rising. If anyone can find her in this wilderness, it's them." They reached a small clearing where Sheriff Townsend and 2 deputies waited. Their faces showed a mixture of concern and doubt as Walter explained their strategy. "With all due respect," one deputy said, "we should be focusing on getting boats in the water, not chasing folk tales about super smart dogs." "We're doing both," Sheriff Townsend replied. "Emergency services are launching from the South Bridge. But if the girl went north into the old forest—" He didn't need to finish the thought. Everyone knew that section of woods was vast and rarely traversed. Walter removed a tarnished metal whistle from his pocket, the same one they'd found in James Morgan's cabin. "This worked for James. It might work for us." Before Sarah could object again, Walter raised the whistle to his lips and blew. No sound reached human ears, but the effect on the forest was immediate. Birds that had been sheltering from the rain took flight. Small creatures rustled in the underbrush, and somewhere in the distance a howl rose above the patter of rainfall, long, mournful, and quickly joined by others. "They heard," Martha whispered, a note of awe in her voice. "They're coming, or we just disturbed every wild animal for miles," the skeptical deputy muttered. Sarah said nothing, her eyes fixed on the dark tree line, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and fear. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they waited. The only sounds, the steady rain and distant thunder. "This isn't working," Sarah finally said, her voice cracking. "My daughter is out there alone, injured or worse, and we're standing in the rain waiting for—" "Look!" Sheriff Townsend interrupted, pointing his flashlight toward the trees. A pair of eyes reflected the beam amber, unblinking, set in a large canine face. A moment later, the animal stepped into the clearing, its coat dark with rain, its bearing regal despite the conditions. It was a German shepherd of unusual size, with a distinctive scar across its muzzle. "Guardian," Walter breathed, using the name James had given the pack's leader in his journal. The dog stopped several yards away, assessing them with an intelligence that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. Its focus settled on her, nostrils flaring as it caught her scent. "It knows you're a Morgan by marriage," Martha whispered. "It's deciding if you're trustworthy." "This is ridiculous," Sarah began, but the words died in her throat as the dog approached her directly, ignoring the others. It stopped just feet away, its amber eyes boring into hers with unsettling intensity. "Show it the picture," Walter urged. "Let it know who we're looking for." With trembling hands, Sarah withdrew the school photo of Lily she'd been showing to search volunteers. The dog's attention immediately fixed on the image, its ears pricking forward with what looked remarkably like recognition. "Please," Sarah whispered, her skepticism crumbling in the face of maternal desperation. "Please help me find her." The dog held her gaze for one more moment, then turned and trotted to the edge of the clearing. There it stopped, looking back at them expectantly. "It wants us to follow," Walter said, already moving toward the animal. "Can we trust it?" Sheriff Townsend asked, hand resting uneasily on his holstered sidearm. "Do we have a choice?" Sarah replied, already following Walter, for the first time since discovering Lily missing. She felt a flicker of hope. It defied logic, challenged everything she thought she knew about animals. But something in that dog's eyes had reached a primal part of her mother to protect her, human to guardian, both concerned with the same precious life. Frank Harrington slammed his truck door, surveying the damage to his breeding facility with mounting rage. The floodwaters had receded enough to allow access, but the destruction was extensive. Fencing had been torn away, outbuildings damaged, and equipment ruined. "Those puppies better have survived," he muttered, splashing through muddy puddles toward the isolated kennel where he'd left the most valuable litter of his career. The genetic markers in those two runts were worth more than the rest of his dogs combined, the culmination of years of careful breeding to recreate the legendary intelligence and abilities of the Morgan dogs. When he reached the kennel, the open door told him everything he needed to know. The puppies were gone. "Damn it!" he shouted, kicking the empty cage. Tracks in the mud confirmed his fears, small human footprints alongside tiny paw prints, leading away from the facility. Someone had taken his puppies. Frank pulled out his phone, dialing quickly despite the poor reception. "We've got a problem," he said when the call connected. "The special litter is gone. Looks like a kid took them during the evacuation." The voice on the other end was calm but threatening. "Find them, Frank. Those puppies are worth millions to the right buyers. And if they make contact with the wild pack, all our work could be compromised." "I'll find them," Frank promised, ending the call and surveying the muddy ground more carefully. The footprints led toward the creek, then disappeared where floodwaters had washed them away. With grim determination, Frank returned to his truck and retrieved a high-powered rifle from behind the seat. Whatever child had stolen his property couldn't have gone far in this weather, and if the wild dogs had found the puppies, well, he'd deal with that problem too. As he set off following the faint trail, Frank remained unaware that his movements were being observed. At the forest's edge, a pair of amber eyes tracked him, and a low growl rumbled in a scarred throat. The hunt had begun, but Frank didn't realize he had become the hunted. Lily stumbled for the third time in as many minutes, her legs leaden with exhaustion. The large dog leading her through the forest paused, looking back with what she could have sworn was concern. "I'm okay," she assured it, though her voice was barely a whisper now. "Just tired." Tiny had grown alarmingly still against her shoulder, his breathing shallow. Brave continued to watch everything with alert eyes, occasionally licking Lily's cheek as if offering encouragement. The dog approached, sniffing the injured puppy with careful attention. Something in its demeanor changed a new urgency that communicated itself to Lily without words. They needed to hurry. "Is there shelter nearby?" she asked, knowing it was foolish to expect an answer from an animal, yet somehow convinced this creature understood. The dog moved ahead again, its pace slightly faster but still mindful of her limitations. Lily followed, forcing her exhausted legs to keep moving. The other wild dogs continued to flank them at a distance, appearing and disappearing among the trees like forest spirits. After what felt like hours but was likely only minutes, they emerged from dense forest into a small clearing. At its center stood an ancient hollow oak, its massive trunk split open on one side, creating a natural shelter large enough for a child to crawl inside. "Is this it?" Lily asked, approaching the tree. The lead dog nudged her gently toward the opening. When Lily peered inside, she found it surprisingly dry. The split faced away from the prevailing wind, and the thick canopy above had prevented much rain from entering. With careful movements, she crawled inside and placed the puppies on a bed of dry leaves. The interior was larger than it appeared from outside, with enough room for her to sit upright. It smelled of earth and wood, not unpleasant, with hints of animal musk suggesting it had been used as a shelter before. "Thank you," she told the wild dog, which had remained at the entrance, watching her settle in. "We'll be safe here until morning." The dog made a soft sound in its throat, then turned and melted back into the forest. Lily felt a momentary panic at being abandoned, but exhaustion quickly overcame fear, curling around the puppies to share her body heat. She finally allowed her heavy eyelids to close. "We'll find our way home tomorrow," she whispered to her small companions as consciousness slipped away. "I promise." She didn't see the wild dogs that took up positions around the hollow tree, forming a protective circle against the dangers of the night. Nor did she hear the distant sound of her name being called as the search party, guided by the pack's leader, steadily made their way toward her temporary sanctuary. In her dreams, Lily walked with her grandfather through sun-dappled woods, his hand warm around hers, his voice explaining the secrets of the forest and the special animals that called it home. "They remember kindness, Lily Pad," Dream James told her with a smile, "and they never forget the scent of family." Dawn broke reluctantly over Oak Ridge, pale light struggling through clouds heavy with the promise of more rain. Lily awoke with a start, momentarily disoriented by her surroundings until the events of the previous day came rushing back. The hollow tree, the flooding creek, the wild dogs that had led her to shelter. The puppies stirred against her. Brave immediately nuzzled her hand, but Tiny barely responded to her touch. His small body felt unnaturally warm, his breathing shallow and rapid. The injury on his leg had worsened overnight, angry red streaks extending from the wound. "You need help," Lily whispered, gently stroking his head. We need to find people. Crawling to the entrance of the hollow tree, Lily peered outside. The rain had stopped, but the forest dripped with moisture, every surface glistening in the early light. The wild dogs that had surrounded their shelter during the night were gone, leaving only trampled vegetation as evidence they had ever been there. Lily's stomach cramped painfully with hunger, and her throat burned with thirst. Nearly 24 hours had passed since she'd had anything to eat or drink. Her clothes were still damp, her skin chilled despite the summer air. Worse, Tiny's condition required immediate attention far beyond what she could provide. "We can't stay here," she decided, though the thought of facing the flooded forest again filled her with dread. Using her jacket, she secured the puppies against her shoulders once more. Tiny whimpered weakly as she lifted him, breaking her heart with his obvious pain. Brave, stronger but still exhausted, settled against her right shoulder with trusting eyes. As Lily emerged from the hollow tree, a sound caught her attention, distant but unmistakable. Water, not the gentle gurgle of Cooper's Creek in its normal state, but the thunderous rush of a swollen river cutting through forest terrain. Following the sound, Lily picked her way carefully through wet underbrush. The going was easier than the previous day, whether because the water had receded in some areas or because she was moving along higher ground. She couldn't tell. After 15 minutes of cautious progress, the trees thinned, revealing a sight that made her gasp. Cooper's Creek had transformed overnight. What had been a modest waterway was now a raging river, at least 3 times its normal width. Trees that had stood along its banks now rose from the middle of the torrent, their trunks battered by debris carried downstream. The crossing she had hoped for didn't exist. "Now what?" she asked aloud, her voice small against the roar of the water. A movement downstream caught her eye. Something large was struggling against the current, a deer perhaps, or a fallen tree. But as Lily watched, she realized it was neither. A boat, a small aluminum fishing boat with an outboard motor, was fighting its way upstream, its single occupant struggling to maintain control in the turbulent water. "Hey!" Lily shouted, waving one arm while supporting the puppies with the other. "Over here, help!" The boater didn't hear her, the water's roar drowning out her small voice. Desperate, Lily looked around for something to signal with. A fallen branch caught her eye, long enough to be visible, but light enough for her to lift. With one arm, she raised it above her head, waving it frantically. This time, the boater noticed, the boat's course altered, turning toward her position on the bank. As it drew closer, Lily recognized the grim, weathered face of Frank Harrington. Relief flooded through her, quickly followed by uncertainty. Would he be angry about the puppies? Did that matter when their lives were at stake? "Mr. Harrington," she called as the boat approached the shoreline. "Please help us." Frank cut the engine, allowing the current to bring the boat's side against a partially submerged tree near the bank. His eyes narrowed as he recognized both Lily and his missing puppies. Well, he said, his voice carrying clearly over the water. "Looks like I found my stolen property." "I didn't steal them," Lily protested. "You left them behind in the flood. They would have drowned." Frank's expression didn't soften. "Those puppies are worth more than your daddy probably makes in a year. Little girl, hand them over, and maybe I'll give you a ride back to town." Lily hesitated, instinctively tightening her hold on the puppies. "Tiny's really sick," she said. "He needs a doctor right away." "I'll take care of my dogs," Frank replied, reaching toward the rifle propped against the boat's side, not pointing it at her, but making sure she saw it. "Now hand them over." Something in his cold eyes made Lily take a step back. This wasn't a man who cared about these puppies' suffering. This was a man who saw them as valuable objects. Nothing more. "They need help first," she insisted, summoning courage from somewhere deep inside. "Tiny might die if he doesn't see a vet soon." Frank's face hardened. "Last chance, girl. Give me those dogs. Or—" A low growl interrupted him, so deep it seemed to vibrate through the ground beneath Lily's feet. From the forest behind her, dark shapes emerged, one, then three, then more, until at least 10 large dogs stood in a semicircle around her. Their fur was raised, teeth bared in silent threat as they faced Frank Harrington across the water. The scarred German shepherd, her guide from the previous night, took position directly beside Lily, its massive body a living shield between her and the man in the boat. The message couldn't have been clearer. The girl and puppies were under their protection. Frank's face drained of color. "Impossible," he whispered, reaching for his rifle with trembling hands. "They've never been seen this close to humans." "Don't," Lily warned, somehow knowing what would happen if he raised that weapon. "They're just protecting us." For a tense moment, Frank seemed to consider his options, eyes darting between the wild dogs and the puppies on Lily's shoulders. Then, with a muttered curse, he yanked the boat's starter cord. The engine roared to life, drowning out the growls of the wild pack. "This isn't over," he called as the boat pulled away from shore. "Those dogs belong to me." Lily watched him disappear downstream, relief washing through her in a dizzying wave. She turned to the wild dogs, words of gratitude forming on her lips, when a new sound reached her ears, voices calling from further upstream. Lily, Lily Morgan, human voices searching for her. The wild dogs heard it too, ears pricking forward, bodies tensing as if preparing to retreat back into the forest depths. "Wait," Lily said to the scarred leader. "Please don't go. They're looking for me. For us." The dog regarded her with those intelligent amber eyes, seeming to consider her words. Then, to Lily's amazement, it sat down beside her, a clear indication it would stay, at least for now. The others remained alert but followed their leader's example, forming a loose circle around Lily and the puppies. "Lily." The voice was closer now, achingly familiar. "Mom," Lily called back, her voice cracking with emotion. "Mom, I'm here." Figures appeared through the trees upstream, her mother in front, followed by Walter Peterson, Sheriff Townsend, and others from the search party. They froze at the sight that greeted them, a small girl standing amid a pack of wild dogs, 2 puppies balanced on her shoulders. Lily, Sarah Morgan's face was a mixture of terror and relief. "Don't move. Honey, stay perfectly still." "It's okay, Mom," Lily called back. "They're helping me. They led me to shelter last night." Sarah took a tentative step forward, then another, her eyes fixed on the massive scarred dog beside her daughter. The animal watched her approach without aggression, but with obvious assessment. "That's Guardian," Walter said quietly from behind Sarah. "The pack leader James wrote about. He's deciding if you're a threat." "I'm not," Sarah whispered, though whether to Walter or the dog, she couldn't have said. "I just want my daughter." When she was 10 feet away, the lead dog Guardian rose to its feet. Sarah froze, heart pounding against her ribs. For a long moment, woman and dog regarded each other across the clearing. Then, slowly, Guardian stepped aside, creating a path between mother and daughter. Permission granted. Sarah rushed forward, dropping to her knees to pull Lily into a fierce embrace, careful of the puppies still secured to her shoulders. "I was so scared," she sobbed, rocking her daughter gently. "When we found your boot by the creek. I'm sorry, Mom," Lily whispered, tears streaming down her dirty face. "I couldn't leave them to drown. And then the water rose so fast." Sarah pulled back, cupping Lily's face in her hands. "Are you hurt? What happened?" "I'm okay, but Tiny isn't," Lily said urgently, indicating the sicker puppy. "He needs help right away. And I saw Mr. Harrington in a boat just now. He wanted to take the puppies, but he seemed scary." Walter Peterson approached carefully, his experienced eyes taking in the scene, the wild dogs maintaining their protective circle. The obviously ill puppy, Lily's exhausted but determined expression. "Let me see him," he said gently, reaching for the injured puppy. Guardian watched but made no move to interfere as Walter examined the wound. "Infection's setting in. He needs antibiotics and proper cleaning of that cut. Dr. Collins is with the second search team," Sheriff Townsend said, keeping a wary eye on the wild dogs. "She can treat him once we get back to town." "And what about them?" Sarah asked, gesturing toward the wild dogs. "They helped her," Walter nodded, a smile crinkling his weathered face. "Just like James always said they would. The Morgan connection runs deep with this pack." As if understanding they were the topic of conversation, Guardian approached Sarah directly. The massive dog stopped just feet away, amber eyes studying her with unnerving intelligence. Then, to everyone's amazement, it lowered its head and pressed its muzzle gently against her hand, the same gesture of acceptance it had shown Lily the previous night. "He recognizes you as family," Walter explained softly. "James would be mighty proud to see this." A commotion from downstream interrupted the moment. Frank Harrington's boat had returned, and he wasn't alone. 2 other men accompanied him, all armed with rifles. They beached the boat roughly and started toward the group, weapons not quite pointed at them but held ready. "Those are my dogs," Frank called, his voice carrying over the rushing water. "That little thief stole them from my property." Sheriff Townsend stepped forward, hand resting on his holstered sidearm. "That's a serious accusation against a 7-year-old girl. Frank, want to explain why you left puppies behind during a flood evacuation? My business is none of your concern." "Bill," Frank replied, eyes fixed on the puppies. "But those animals are valuable breeding stock, and I'm taking them back." The wild dogs reacted instantly to the threatening tone, closing ranks around Lily, Sarah, and the others. Guardian's fur rose along his spine, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest. The other dogs followed suit, creating a wall of bristling fur and bared teeth between the search party and Frank's group. Frank raised his rifle slightly. "Call off these mutts, Peterson, or I'll put them down where they stand." "You won't do that," Walter said calmly. "First, because it'd be the last thing you ever did. That pack would tear you apart before you got off a second shot. And second, because I suspect there's a lot about your breeding operation that wouldn't stand up to proper inspection. Such as why those puppies share DNA markers with a protected wild pack." Came a new voice. "Dr." Rebecca Collins emerged from the trees, medical bag in hand, her expression grim as she surveyed the standoff. "I've had my suspicions about your operation for months. Frank, genetic testing would make for interesting evidence." Frank's face contorted with rage. "You've got no right." "We've got every right," Sheriff Townsend interrupted. "Now lower those weapons before this gets ugly." For a tense moment, it seemed Frank might refuse. His finger twitched near the rifle's trigger as his gaze darted between the wild dogs, the sheriff, and the puppies still clutched in Lily's arms. Then, with a muttered curse, he lowered his weapon. "This isn't over," he spat, backing toward his boat. His companions followed suit, eyes fixed warily on the growling dogs. "Oh, I think it is," Sheriff Townsend replied, "because those gentlemen with you look an awful lot like the poachers we've been tracking for illegal wildlife trafficking. And I'd bet my badge there's evidence at your breeding facility that would interest both local authorities and the FBI." As Frank and his men retreated to their boat, Guardian watched with alert vigilance, only relaxing his stance when the vessel disappeared around a bend in the swollen creek. Then the massive dog turned back to Lily, nudging her gently as if checking her condition. "I'm okay," she assured him, reaching out to stroke his scarred head. "Thanks to you." Dr. Collins approached cautiously, respecting the wild dog's space while focusing on the immediate medical needs. "Let me see that puppy. Honey," she said gently. "We need to act quickly if we're going to save him." As Lily carefully handed over Tiny's limp form, she felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. 24 hours of fear, exertion, and hunger suddenly caught up with her small body. The world tilted sideways as her knees buckled. "Mom," she whispered, reaching out as darkness closed in from the edges of her vision. The last thing Lily saw before consciousness fled was Guardian moving with impossible speed to position himself beneath her falling body, breaking her collapse with his own strong frame as Sarah cried out in alarm. Even in unconsciousness, Lily remained surrounded by protectors, human and canine alike, united in their determination to bring her safely home. Antiseptic smells and the soft beeping of medical equipment greeted Lily as consciousness slowly returned. Her eyelids felt impossibly heavy, but she forced them open, blinking against the harsh fluorescent lights of Oak Ridge Community Hospital's pediatric ward. "Mom," she called, her voice a dry whisper. Sarah Morgan's face appeared above her, eyes red-rimmed from crying but bright with relief. "I'm here, baby. You're okay." "The puppies." Lily tried to sit up, but gentle hands pressed her back against the pillows. "They're being treated," Sarah assured her. "Dr. Collins is taking care of them personally." Memories flooded back the flood. The wild dogs, Frank Harrington's threatening face. Lily's eyes widened as the most important question surfaced. "Tiny, is he?" Sarah smoothed her daughter's tangled hair. Dr. Collins says he's fighting hard. The infection was serious, but he's on strong antibiotics now. It's still touch and go, honey." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. After everything they'd been through, the thought of losing Tiny was unbearable. "I want to see him." "Soon," Sarah promised. "But you need to rest first. You were severely dehydrated and exhausted. The doctor wants to keep you overnight for observation." Lily sank back against the pillows, suddenly aware of the IV line in her arm and the hospital gown that had replaced her muddy clothes. "How long was I asleep?" "About 6 hours," Sarah answered, checking her watch. "It's just past noon. And the wild dog's guardian." Something flickered across Sarah's face, uncertainty, perhaps, or wonder. "They followed us at a distance until the ambulance arrived. Then they disappeared back into the forest, all except—" She hesitated. "Except what?" Lily prompted. "The big one guardian he wouldn't leave. Not until they loaded you into the ambulance. He just sat there, watching, like he was making sure you were being properly cared for." Sarah shook her head, still processing the extraordinary events. "Walter says he's never seen them behave that way with humans, not even with your grandfather." A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Sheriff Townsend entered, his uniform rumpled from what had clearly been a long day. He removed his hat, nodding respectfully to Sarah before turning a gentle smile toward Lily. "Well now, look who's awake. How you feeling, young lady?" "Better," Lily answered. "Did you catch Mr. Harrington?" The sheriff's expression hardened. "We did indeed. Found some mighty interesting things at his breeding facility, too. Records, medications that aren't legal for animal use, evidence of selling to overseas buyers without proper permits." He shook his head. "Man's facing serious charges." "What about the puppies?" Lily asked, her real concern evident. "That's actually why I stopped by," Sheriff Townsend said, his expression softening. "Dr. Collins asked me to give you an update. The stronger pup." "Brave," Lily interrupted. "I named him Brave." The sheriff smiled. "Brave. Then he's doing just fine. Already eating and causing a ruckus at the vet clinic." His smile faded slightly. "Tiny's still struggling, though Dr. Collins has him on oxygen and antibiotics, but she's concerned about his heart. The stress and infection have weakened him considerably." Fresh tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. "He has to make it," she whispered. "He fought so hard." "Dr. Collins is doing everything possible," Sheriff Townsend assured her. "That woman works miracles with animals. If anyone can save him, she can." Another knock came at the door, and Walter Peterson peered in, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Lily awake. "There's our wilderness survivor," he said warmly. "Mind if I come in? Got something that might interest you." At Sarah's nod, Walter entered, carrying a worn, leather-bound book that Lily recognized as one of her grandfather's journals. He pulled a chair up beside the bed. "Been reading through your grandpa's notes," he said, patting the journal. "Thought you might want to hear some of what he wrote about Guardian and his pack." Despite her worry over Tiny, Lily found herself intrigued. "Yes, please." Walter opened the journal to a marked page. James first encountered Guardian as a pup, about 8 years ago. Found him caught in an illegal trap with a nasty gash across his face. That's where the scar comes from. Your grandpa freed him, treated the wound best he could, and expected the pup to run off. Walter's eyes crinkled at the corners. But that pup didn't run. He followed James home, stayed at the edge of the property for weeks while he healed. "Grandpa never told me that story," Lily said softly. "James noticed something special about him right away." Walter continued. "An intelligence beyond normal canine understanding. The pup would bring other injured animals to the edge of the property, birds with broken wings, a fox kit with a thorn in its paw, almost like he was asking for help." "That's amazing," Sarah murmured, her skepticism softening in the face of these revelations. Over time, James realized this pup was connected to stories he'd heard about unusually intelligent dogs living in these woods for generations. Walter explained, dogs that would occasionally help lost hikers find their way, or chase predators away from children who wandered too far from home. "The guardian dogs," Lily whispered. Walter nodded. James spent years documenting their behavior, protecting them from hunters and trappers. He discovered they weren't just intelligent, they had a moral code of sorts. They protected the vulnerable, punished those who caused harm, maintained balance in their territory. "And they knew Lily was James's granddaughter?" Sarah asked, still struggling to accept what she'd witnessed. "Animals have ways of knowing things we don't understand," Walter replied simply. "Scent is powerful to them, family connections, emotions, intentions. Those dogs sensed who Lily was, and what was in her heart when she risked herself to save those puppies." A commotion in the hallway interrupted their conversation, hurried footsteps, a door slamming open, and a woman's voice calling orders to hospital staff. A moment later, Dr. Collins burst into the room, her face flushed with exertion and something that looked like amazement. "You need to see this," she said without preamble. "All of you, now." "What's happened?" Sarah asked, rising to her feet. "Is it the puppy?" "Just come," Dr. Collins insisted, already heading back toward the door. "Lily, can you walk? It's important." With Sarah's help. Lily disconnected from the IV and slipped into a robe and slippers. They followed Dr. Collins down the hospital corridor and through a service exit that led to the parking lot. The veterinarian hurried them toward her clinic, which sat adjacent to the hospital grounds. "I had Tiny in the oxygen kennel," she explained as they walked. "His condition was deteriorating despite everything we were doing. His heart rate was dropping, oxygen levels falling. I stepped out to call the emergency animal hospital in Nashville for a consultation." Her voice held a note of wonder. "When I came back 10 minutes later, I found this." They reached the clinic's rear entrance, where Dr. Collins punched a security code into the keypad. The door swung open to reveal a treatment room that had been transformed into something extraordinary. Tiny lay in his oxygen kennel. But he was no longer alone. Somehow, Guardian had entered the clinic. The massive wild dog sat beside the kennel, his scarred face pressed against the clear plastic door, eyes fixed on the ailing puppy. More incredibly, Tiny was awake, his small body pressed against the barrier separating him from the larger dog, responding to Guardian's presence. His vitals started improving the moment that big dog showed up, Dr. Collins said, her scientific mind clearly struggling with what she was witnessing. Heartbeat stronger, oxygen levels climbing, temperature normalizing. It's like he was giving up until his family found him. Lily finished softly. Guardian turned at their entrance. Amber eyes finding Lily immediately. The connection between them was almost tangible recognition, respect, a shared concern for the small life fighting to survive. "How did he get in?" Sheriff Townsend asked, staring in disbelief. "Doctor," Collins shook her head. "No idea. The doors were locked, windows closed. One minute the room was empty except for the puppies. The next—" She gestured helplessly at Guardian. "It's impossible, but here he is. But here he—" Lily approached slowly, drawn toward the wild dog that had guided her to safety. Guardian watched her come, his powerful body completely still except for his steady breathing. When she was close enough to touch, she extended her hand, palm up in greeting. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Guardian gently pressed his muzzle into her palm, acceptance, acknowledgement, a silent communication that transcended species barriers. Then he turned back to the kennel, where Tiny had struggled to his feet and was pressing his nose against the plastic, seeking contact with the larger dog. "I've never seen anything like this, Doctor," Collins murmured, checking the monitors attached to Tiny's small body. "His readings are almost normal now. It's like the will to live has been reawakened." Sarah watched in wonder, her hand gripping Walter's arm as if needing support to process what she was seeing. "It's really happening, isn't it? Everything James wrote about these dogs was true?" Walter nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "James always said there were mysteries in these woods that science couldn't explain. Connections between living creatures that went deeper than biology." As they watched, Guardian settled his massive body on the floor beside the kennel, his posture making it clear he had no intention of leaving. Tiny, drawing strength from the older dog's presence, curled up against the clear barrier, his small eyes finally closing in peaceful sleep rather than exhaustion. The message couldn't have been clearer. The puppy would not face his battle alone. And neither, Lily realized with a rush of emotion, would she. She had found her own guardians in these extraordinary animals, wild yet gentle, fierce yet nurturing, connected to her through bonds of blood and compassion that defied simple explanation. For the first time since her grandfather's death, Lily felt the aching hole in her heart begin to heal. James Morgan was gone, but his legacy lived on in the forest, in these remarkable animals, and now in her. 3 days later, Lily sat on the front porch of their farmhouse, watching as Brave explored the fenced yard with boundless energy. The stronger puppy had recovered quickly, his resilient nature evident in every playful bounce and curious investigation. Tiny, however, remained at the veterinary clinic, his condition improving but still fragile. Sarah emerged from the house carrying 2 glasses of lemonade, handing one to Lily before settling into the rocking chair beside her. In the days since the rescue, mother and daughter had begun rebuilding their relationship on new foundations, ones that acknowledged Lily's courage and Sarah's need to protect her. "Dr. Collins called while you were feeding Brave," Sarah said, sipping her lemonade. "She thinks Tiny might be strong enough to come home tomorrow." Lily's face brightened. Really? Sarah nodded, though her expression remained cautious. He'll need special care for a while. Medication twice daily. Limited activity until his heart strengthens. I'll take care of him, Lily promised, her voice solemn with responsibility. I won't let anything happen to him. I know you won't, honey. Sarah reached over to brush a strand of hair from Lily's face. You've proven how responsible you can be, even if it nearly gave me a heart attack in the process. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Brave chase a butterfly across the yard. The peaceful scene was interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel as Sheriff Townsend's patrol car pulled into their driveway. Sarah rose to greet him as he approached the porch, his expression more serious than his usual friendly demeanor. Afternoon, Sarah. Lily, he said, removing his hat. Hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, Sarah replied. Can I offer you some lemonade? That would be mighty nice. The sheriff accepted, settling onto the porch steps. He waited until Sarah had gone inside for another glass before turning his attention to Lily. How you holding up, young lady? Quite an adventure you had. I'm okay, Lily answered, watching him carefully. Something in his manner suggested this wasn't merely a social call. Is something wrong? Sheriff Townsend sighed, turning his hat in his hands. Not wrong exactly. But there have been some developments regarding Frank Harrington and those puppies that I thought you should know about. Sarah returned with lemonade, catching the end of his statement. What kind of developments? After we arrested Frank, we executed a search warrant on his breeding facility and residence, the sheriff explained, accepting the glass gratefully. Found records going back years. Turns out he's been trying to recreate something he called the Morgan Dog Line through selective breeding. The Morgan Dog Line? Sarah repeated, brow furrowed. According to his notes, Frank became obsessed with stories about unusually intelligent dogs in these woods dogs connected to your family, James in particular. He spent years trying to capture members of the wild pack for breeding, but could never get close enough. So he started collecting dogs with similar characteristics, trying to recreate their intelligence and abilities through conventional breeding. Those poor animals, Sarah murmured. There's more, Sheriff Townsend continued. We found correspondence between Frank and several foreign buyers, military contractors, private security firms, even government agencies interested in dogs with exceptional intelligence for specialized work. Those puppies Lily rescued weren't just valuable, they represented the culmination of his breeding program. Lily's arms wrapped protectively around herself, her eyes drifting to Brave playing innocently in the yard. He said they were worth a lot of money. Millions, according to his records, the sheriff confirmed grimly. Which is why we've had FBI agents combing through his operation for the past 2 days. They've taken most of his dogs into protective custody, pending animal welfare investigations. Sarah sat forward, suddenly alert. What does this mean for the puppies, for Brave and Tiny? The sheriff's expression softened. That's what I came to discuss. Legally, those puppies were obtained under suspicious circumstances, potentially stolen property, even though Frank abandoned them during the evacuation. He left them to die, Lily protested, her voice rising. You can't give them back to him. Nobody's suggesting that, Sheriff Townsend assured her quickly. Frank's facing multiple federal charges, animal cruelty. illegal trafficking, fraud. He won't be breeding dogs anytime soon." "Then what happens to them?" Sarah asked. "The FBI agent in charge, man named Peterson, no relation to our Walter. He's been consulting with both legal experts and animal behaviorists. The situation is unusual." The sheriff took a long drink of lemonade before continuing. "Those puppies have a complicated status. They're evidence in a federal case, but they're also living beings with needs." Lily's lower lip trembled. "Are they going to take them away?" Before the sheriff could answer, a sound from the edge of the property drew their attention. A familiar figure emerged from the tree-lined guardian, his scarred face unmistakable even at a distance. The wild dog stood watching them, alert but unthreatening, a sentinel at the boundary between forest and farmyard. Sheriff Townsend stared in amazement. "He's been showing up like that for 3 days now," Sarah explained quietly. "Never comes into the yard, just watches." "Like he's checking on Lily and the puppy," the sheriff murmured, shaking his head in wonder. "He is," Lily said with absolute certainty. "He's making sure we're okay," as if confirming her assessment. Guardian sat down at the forest's edge, amber eyes fixed on the house with patient vigilance. Brave noticed the wild dog and raced to the fence, yipping excitedly but showing no fear of the massive canine watching from a distance. "That's another complication," Sheriff Townsend said, gesturing toward Guardian. "The FBI team witnessed something similar at the vet clinic yesterday. Wild dogs from the forest appearing near the buildings, apparently monitoring Tiny's condition from outside. Dr. Collins said she's never seen anything like it." "They're family," Lily said simply. "The puppies are part of their pack." The sheriff nodded slowly. "That's the conclusion their animal behavior expert came to as well. And it's led to a rather unusual decision." He set his empty glass down, turning to face Sarah directly. "The FBI is proposing a formal fostering arrangement. The puppies would remain legally under government supervision as evidence, but would stay with Lily as their primary caregiver." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "They want a 7-year-old to be responsible for evidence in a federal case, with proper adult supervision, of course," the sheriff clarified. "Weekly check-ins from their team, regular veterinary evaluations, but yes, essentially they're recognizing that these puppies have formed critical attachments both to Lily and to the wild pack that seems determined to protect them." "What happens when the case is over?" Sarah asked, the practical question that Lily hadn't thought to ask. "That's where it gets interesting," Sheriff Townsend replied. "If all goes well with the fostering period, they're prepared to officially release the puppies to your custody permanently. But there's a condition." "What condition?" Lily asked, leaning forward anxiously. The sheriff's expression turned serious. "The FBI wants to establish a protected status for the entire wild pack, a conservation area covering about 2,000 acres of the forest where they live. They're calling it the Morgan Wildlife Preserve in honor of your grandfather's work." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "James that would have meant everything to him." "The condition is that someone needs to serve as the official liaison with the wild pack, continuing James's documentation, monitoring their health and territory, essentially becoming their human advocate." The sheriff looked directly at Lily. "Agent Peterson believes that person should be you. Lily, with proper training and adult supervision until you're older." Lily's eyes widened. Me? But I'm just a kid. A kid who survived alone in a flood zone, rescued abandoned animals, and somehow communicated with a pack of wild dogs that normally avoid human contact. Sheriff Townsend pointed out. More importantly, a Morgan. According to your grandfather's journals, these dogs have a special connection to your family going back generations. It's a lot to consider, Sarah interjected, clearly concerned about the responsibility being placed on her young daughter's shoulders. Of course, the sheriff agreed. Agent Peterson will be stopping by tomorrow to discuss the details. No pressure for an immediate decision. As they spoke, Guardian rose to his feet at the forest's edge, his attention suddenly focused on something beyond their view. A moment later, a government SUV appeared on the road approaching their property. Guardian retreated several steps into the trees, but remained visible, watching with alert wariness. The vehicle parked behind the sheriff's patrol car, and a man in a crisp suit emerged, followed by Dr. Collins carrying a pet carrier. Lily jumped to her feet, hope blooming in her chest. "Tiny," she whispered. "Doctor," Collins smiled as she approached the porch. "Someone couldn't wait until tomorrow to come home," she said, setting the carrier down and opening its door. "His recovery has been nothing short of miraculous." A small, furry head poked out cautiously, amber eyes blinking in the sunlight. Tiny looked transformed from the critically ill puppy of just days before his coat cleaner, his eyes brighter, his movements, though still careful, much stronger. "Oh." Lily dropped to her knees as Tiny emerged fully from the carrier, his tail wagging tentatively as he recognized her. "You're okay." The puppy approached her, sniffing her outstretched hands before pressing his small body against her legs in greeting. Brave, noticing the commotion, barked excitedly from the yard, desperate to join the reunion. "His recovery defies medical explanation," Dr. Collins told Sarah quietly. "The infection should have caused permanent heart damage, but all his tests have come back normal. I've never seen anything like it." The suited man approached, extending his hand to Sarah. "Mrs. Morgan, I'm Agent Peterson, FBI Wildlife Trafficking Division. I apologize for arriving unannounced, but when Dr. Collins declared Tiny ready for release, I thought you might want him home as soon as possible." As the adults exchanged introductions, Lily remained focused on Tiny, gently examining the healing wound on his leg. The puppy licked her hand, his trust absolute despite everything he'd endured. A movement from the tree line caught her attention. Guardian had moved closer, watching the reunion with what Lily could only describe as satisfaction in his intelligent eyes. Then something extraordinary happened. Guardian threw back his head and released a single resonant howl that carried across the property. From the depths of the forest came answering calls, first one, then three, then many more, a chorus of wild voices acknowledging the small survivor's return. Agent Peterson froze mid-sentence, turning toward the sound with wide eyes. "Is that the pack?" Sheriff Townsend confirmed. "Seems they're celebrating too." Dr. Collins shook her head in amazement. "In all my years of veterinary practice, I've never witnessed anything like the connection between these animals. It's as if the wild dogs somehow contributed to Tiny's healing, a phenomenon we can't explain through conventional medicine." As the howls faded, Guardian remained at the forest's edge, his scarred face proud and vigilant. Lily caught his amber gaze across the distance, feeling a connection that transcended words or scientific explanation. In that moment, she understood what her grandfather had dedicated his life to protecting not just animals, but a mystery, a relationship between species that defied simple classification. "I'll do it," she said suddenly, interrupting the adult conversation. "I'll be their liaison. I'll take care of Brave and Tiny, and I'll help protect Guardian's pack." Agent Peterson studied her with newfound respect. "That's a big responsibility for someone your age." "I know," Lily acknowledged. "But Grandpa James always said that when something important chooses you, saying no isn't an option." At the edge of the forest, Guardian seemed to nod in approval before melting back into the shadows. His mission, for now, complete. The puppies were safe, the Morgan connection re-established, and a new chapter in their shared history beginning. The truth about the extraordinary dogs of Oak Ridge was finally emerging from the shadows, just as Tiny had emerged from the darkness of near-death, fragile yet resilient, mysterious yet undeniable, challenging everything humans thought they knew about the boundaries between wildness and connection. 1 month later, Lily sat cross-legged on the grass at the edge of her grandfather's old cabin, which had been renovated to serve as the headquarters for the newly established Morgan Wildlife Preserve. Brave and Tiny sprawled beside her, no longer tiny puppies, but growing rapidly into handsome young dogs. Their German Shepherd heritage was increasingly evident in their maturing features, though Tiny remained smaller than his brother, a permanent reminder of his difficult start in life. "Hold still," Lily instructed as she carefully measured a soft leather collar against Tiny's neck. The collar, handcrafted by Martha Jenkins's grandson, bore a small silver tag engraved with the puppy's name and the Morgan family phone number. "There, perfect," she declared, fastening it securely. Brave already wore his matching collar proudly, occasionally pawing at it as if to show it off. Both puppies had flourished under Lily's care, their intelligence remarkable even to the FBI specialists who visited weekly to document their development. They responded to over 30 verbal commands, could follow complex multi-step instructions, and demonstrated problem-solving abilities that Dr. Collins described as off the charts for canines their age. "Lily, you about ready?" Sarah called from the cabin porch where she was setting out refreshments for the day's visitors. "Coming," Lily replied, gathering her notebook and pencils. Today marked the official dedication of the Morgan Wildlife Preserve, with local officials, FBI representatives, and community members gathering to celebrate what the Oak Ridge Gazette had dubbed a remarkable partnership between humans and nature. The past month had transformed not just the puppies but the Morgan family as well. Sarah had embraced her role as the preserve's administrative director, managing permits and working with conservation authorities, while Lily focused on what everyone now acknowledged was her special gift, communicating with and documenting the wild pack. Walter Peterson had come out of retirement to serve as their mentor, teaching Lily tracking techniques and helping translate her grandfather's sometimes cryptic research notes. As for the wild dogs themselves, Guardian's pack had maintained a careful distance from the increased human activity, yet remained a visible presence at the preserve's boundaries. Twice weekly, Lily would take the puppies to a small clearing her grandfather had designated as a neutral meeting ground, where Guardian and occasionally other pack members would emerge from the forest for brief interactions. These meetings are critical for the puppy's development, Agent Peterson had explained after observing one such encounter. They're being socialized to both human and wild canine social structures, a unique dual upbringing that may explain the remarkable adaptability of these animals throughout the generations. The sound of vehicles approaching down the gravel road pulled Lily from her thoughts. She whistled sharply, one of the first commands she'd taught the puppies, and both young dogs immediately came to attention, falling into position on either side of her as they trotted toward the cabin. Sheriff Townsend's patrol car led the procession, followed by Dr. Collins' truck, Martha Jenkins' ancient station wagon, and several official vehicles bearing government plates. Last in line was a news van from the regional television station, invited to document the preserve's dedication for their evening broadcast. "Remember what we practiced," Sarah murmured as Lily joined her on the porch. The community's interest in Lily's story had been overwhelming, requiring careful management of media access. Today would be her first official interview, limited to pre-approved questions about the preserve rather than the more sensational aspects of her rescue. "I remember," Lily assured her, unconsciously straightening her blue dress, her special occasion outfit that made her feel more grown up and confident, as the visitors parked and began making their way toward the cabin. Lily noticed Walter Peterson standing slightly apart from the others, his weathered face turned toward the forest with an expression of anticipation. Following his gaze, she spotted what he had already seen, Guardian, watching from the tree line, several members of his pack visible as shadows behind him. "They're here," she whispered to Sarah, nodding discreetly toward the forest edge. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. In all the weeks since Lily's rescue, she had glimpsed the wild dogs only fleetingly. "Do you think they'll stay with all these people?" "I don't know," Lily admitted. "But Guardian understands this is important." As if hearing his name, the scarred dog shifted position, moving to a more visible spot at the forest's edge. The assembled visitors noticed, conversations faltering as attention turned toward the magnificent animal observing their gathering. "Well, I'll be," Sheriff Townsend murmured, removing his hat respectfully. "Didn't expect them to make an appearance today." Agent Peterson approached, his usual formal demeanor softened by genuine excitement. "Extraordinary. They're acknowledging the preserve's establishment. This is exactly the kind of behavior James Morgan documented awareness of significant human activities affecting their territory." Dr. Collins joined them, her scientific curiosity evident. "The pack hasn't come this close to such a large human gathering in all the years I've lived in Oak Ridge. They're usually invisible unless you're miles deep in the back country." The ceremony began with brief speeches from local officials, followed by Agent Peterson explaining the unique legal protections now covering the preserve. Lily, seated between Sarah and Walter in the place of honor, found her attention divided between the human proceedings and Guardian's continued vigilance from the forest edge. The wild dog hadn't moved, his amber eyes seemingly fixed on her throughout the speeches. When it came time for the official dedication, Sheriff Townsend called Lily forward. "Since this preserve honors the Morgan family legacy, it seems fitting that the youngest Morgan should do the honors," he said, handing her a small pair of ceremonial scissors, heart-pounding. Lily approached the ribbon stretched across the cabin's entrance. As rehearsed, she turned to face the small crowd gathered on the lawn. "My grandfather, James Morgan, spent his life protecting these woods and the animals that call them home," she began, her clear voice carrying despite her nervousness. "He believed that sometimes the most special things in life are the ones we can't fully explain. We can only respect them and learn from them." She glanced toward Guardian, drawing strength from his steady presence. The Morgan Wildlife Preserve isn't just about protecting land or animals. It's about protecting relationships between humans and nature, between wild and domestic, between past and future. Her fingers tightened around the scissors. I'm proud to continue my grandfather's work, and I promise to be a voice for those who can't speak for themselves. With those words, she turned and cut the ribbon. Applause erupted from the gathered crowd. Cameras flashed, and the puppies at her feet barked enthusiastically as if adding their approval. As the ceremony transitioned to a more casual reception, Lily noticed Guardian finally moving from his observation post. Rather than retreating deeper into the forest as expected, the wild dog began making his way along the tree line, circling toward the back of the property where fewer people had gathered. Trusting her instincts, Lily quietly slipped away from the main celebration, Brave and Tiny following closely. They found Guardian waiting in a small clearing behind the cabin, the same spot where James Morgan had first treated his injured face years ago. "You came," Lily said softly, approaching the wild dog with respect but without fear. Guardian watched her with those intelligent eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. When she was just a few feet away, he did something unprecedented. He lowered himself to the ground in a relaxed position, signaling not just acceptance, but invitation. Lily slowly sat down facing him, the puppies settling on either side of her. For several minutes, they simply existed together in peaceful silence. A tableau that would have astonished any wildlife biologist, a young girl and two puppies in quiet communion with a wild alpha canine. "I understand now," Lily finally whispered. "What Grandpa meant in his journals. It's not about training or controlling. It's about trusting and respecting." Guardian's ears twitched forward at the sound of her voice. Then, with deliberate movement, he extended one paw and placed it gently on her hand, a gesture so human-like, so intentional, that tears sprang to Lily's eyes. "Lily," Sarah's voice called from around the cabin. "Where did you go?" Guardian immediately withdrew his paw, but didn't flee. He remained calm, even as Sarah appeared at the edge of the clearing, freezing mid-step at the sight before her. "Oh," she breathed, clearly uncertain whether to approach or retreat. "It's okay, Mom," Lily assured her. "Guardian wants to meet you properly." Sarah hesitated, years of caution warring with the evidence of her own eyes. Slowly, she moved forward until she stood beside her daughter. "Hello," she said softly to the wild dog, feeling slightly foolish yet compelled to acknowledge him as more than just an animal. Guardian regarded her steadily, his amber eyes assessing. Then, with the same deliberate movement he had shown Lily, he extended his paw toward Sarah. "He wants you to shake," Lily explained, understanding the gesture instinctively. With trembling fingers, Sarah reached out and gently clasped the offered paw. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving my daughter." A rustling from the forest announced the arrival of other pack members, 3 females and 2 younger males. Approaching with cautious curiosity, they formed a semicircle behind Guardian, watching but making no threatening moves. "The Pack Council," Lily said, remembering her grandfather's notes. "Guardian is introducing us formally." As if confirming her words, Guardian rose and moved to stand beside the Morgan women, facing his pack. The message couldn't have been clearer. These humans were to be accepted, protected, considered allies rather than intruders. One by one, the wild dogs approached, each briefly sniffing Sarah and Lily before retreating. The puppies sat remarkably still throughout this ceremony, instinctively understanding its importance. When the last dog had completed the ritual, Guardian turned back to Lily and Sarah, his expression somehow satisfied. "I think we just signed a peace treaty," Sarah murmured, awe evident in her voice. Before Lily could respond, Walter's voice called from the cabin. "Lily News folks are asking for that interview now." Guardian's ears pricked at the reminder of the human gathering nearby. With one final look at Lily, a look that somehow conveyed both farewell and promise, he turned and loped back toward the deeper forest, his pack falling in behind him. As they disappeared among the trees, Lily felt not sadness, but certainty. This wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The first chapter of a new relationship between the Morgan family and the extraordinary dogs that had chosen them as their human counterparts. "Come on," she said, rising to her feet. "We have a preserve to protect." Hand in hand, mother and daughter walked back toward the celebration, the puppies trotting proudly beside them. Behind them, unseen but undeniably present, the spirit of James Morgan seemed to walk with them, his life's work now carried forward by the granddaughter who had discovered her own remarkable connection to the guardians of the forest. Folks, I want to share something with you about connections that transcend our understanding. Like young Lily and those remarkable dogs, we all seek bonds that make us feel protected and valued. Remember when neighbors knew each other's stories? When we didn't need to lock our doors at night? The Morgan Wildlife Preserve reminds us that some things haven't changed: loyalty, protection of the vulnerable, and the wisdom to recognize goodness when we see it. Many of you raised children who now have families of their own. You taught them values that may seem forgotten in today's world. But just as Guardian recognized something special in Lily's bloodline, your legacy continues in ways you might not see. The sacrifices you made, the lessons you taught, they're still alive, working their quiet magic through generations. We may feel like strangers in a world changing too fast, but our wisdom matters more than ever. Like James Morgan's journals guiding his granddaughter. Your life experiences are treasures waiting to be discovered by those who need them most. Some connections can never be broken, not by time, not by distance, not even by death.